The Male Unbonding is the first episode, of course, that has Elaine in it. Originally, and I'm not sure why, Elaine was apparently supposed to be called Eileen at first. But I don't know why they changed it to Elaine instead. But this is actually this was the second episode that was produced, but it was the fourth one to air. So there is, I'd say, a little bit of not continuity from this episode to episode 3, which is the stakeout. Because this one they more so just had Elaine just show up. In the stakeout, which we'll get to next, that more so kind of explores the state and the early awkward stages of Jerry and Elaine, getting past the breakup and being able to still be friends and talk about other people. But the Male Unbonding episode is the main story of this is Jerry has a friend named Joel Hornick. He's known for many years because they were neighbors, and they played ping pong all the time. Other than that, Jerry wasn't really super crazy about him, but Joel was always calling Jerry. Jerry's never calling Joel. Joel was calling him all the time. It's one of those friends. It's one of those people that's like you try to be nice and they're around, but it's just like you really don't want to go out of the way for them. Basically, is what it is. So he kept calling Jerry, wanting to meet up. Jerry, was trying to find excuses as to why he couldn't go out. But then, of course, here and there he'd have to cave at some point, or else Joel would catch on. And of course, Jerry in the opening scene, well, besides the fact that him and George had just come back, George was talking about how, I'm a guy who likes to, tell women how I honestly feel, and it just gets me in trouble, which I feel that for you, George, for sure. He tells a girl that we hadn't met, which apparently, if they were going to bring her on screen, they were going to call her Lois, I heard. Which, of course, Jerry dates a Lois, and loves the name Lois in the race, because remember, he had to be Superman in order to do that, Lois. But later on, they break up. But George thinks it may have also been the fact that he had a bunch of floss come out of his pocket or something like that. It was random. But when they get to the apartment, which also, the first few episodes, still some inconsistencies with the future apartment. For starters, the hallway was different. Even though we never really seen much of the hallway at all. In some episodes, Jerry's apartment is 411. A few of them, it was 3A. It ended up being 5A for the whole series. But, of course, some inconsistency at the beginning. Still getting the kinks out of the show. So I can kind of forgive it a little bit in some ways. But Kramer was on the phone, and then he said, "Oh, Jerry, it's for you." And Jerry's like, "Who is it?" He goes, "It's for you." Like, Kramer won't tell Jerry, who is it? Like, Jerry wants to know, who am I being prepared to talk to? It could be someone, after all, that he doesn't want to talk to. And, like I probably said before, Kramer being the type of guy who basically, just says it's the wrong place, wrong time, says wrong things at the wrong time, gives Jerry the phone, and it ends up being Joel, and Jerry had to make plans with him for Wednesday. And like he said, he has the attention span of a 5-year-old, and it is very all about him. That's all it is. So they plan to meet up with Joel at Monk's on Wednesday. And this was the first episode also, we see Monk's Cafe. And you can tell instantly, Joel only likes to talk about himself. He only cares about himself. He kept talking up a storm. Jerry's trying to tell him the latest of his comedy career and whatnot, but Joel literally just kept changing the subject to talk about him. He chewed out the waitress for not knowing if it was real turkey or not on the menu. And as stated, when they talked about earlier about how Jerry's basically trying to tell Joel enough is enough, I don't want to see you anymore, he just doesn't want to hang out with him anymore. And basically he was told, you gotta treat it like it's you're actually breaking up with a woman. Jerry basically does the whole, I don't think it's working out, and Joel literally just cried like a baby. He just cried. He's like, Jerry, I'm your best friend. We played ping pong for all those years. And Jerry's saying, like, yeah, ping pong's all we had in common. And Jerry, who, there's some episodes where Jerry obviously, like I said, the 4 characters, they definitely had some very pity things that they just, just couldn't handle. It was very pity. It's like, come on. This, like, I could get it. Like Jerry was just with this guy again who just literally only cared about himself. But Jerry, of course, just saw spot. He feels bad. He offers him George's ticket to the Knicks game they were going the following Tuesday night. And in the midst of them going to the bank, and George telling Jerry about how the date with the girl didn't go too good, and she basically broke it off, and he basically had to awkwardly sit there and eat a meal. He had to pick up the tab. She basically passed the tab over to him, and that's it. Basically, he has to break the news and say, "I'm sorry, I sold your ticket. I gave your ticket to Joel." And George is like, "How could you do that to me?" Basically, whatnot. And Jerry's like, "I had to." He was upset. So then eventually, though, Jerry, like hours before the game, Jerry called Joel, and he literally had like a list of excuses right by his phone of why he couldn't go. And he said that, I can't go to the game tonight. I'll leave my tickets at will call. You go to the game. You take someone else with you, basically. And his excuse was, I think it was, he had to tutor his nephew for a geometry test. I think it was. It was very last minute or so. What he said. And then we see the first scene with Elaine, where I guess Julia Louis-Dreyfus was saying how she remembers that Jerry was impressed because while they were talking, she was chewing on like a peanut M&M, and I guess Jerry was impressed with apparently the fact that she was able to chew on it without cracking the peanut and just the M&M or something. That was just some type of weird talent they had to point out. Basically was we want to do. I want to go out, but I'm not too hungry. Okay, well, we can just go to a cafe and just relax and talk. I'll go out to talk, but it's just like, it's like, can't really satisfy on either end. So, Jerry went to go check his answering machine, and Elaine saw the list of excuses for Joel. So, Elaine reads them and is going like, oh, and she starts adding in her own, which are like completely ridiculous. Like one that like the jokester friend would add, basically. And then Kramer shows up. Kramer was the one who ended up being invited to go to the game with Joel, because in the beginning of the episode, whenever Kramer was on the phone with Joel, he was telling Joel, because this is also the first episode where Kramer pitched this idea of he wanted to make a pizza place where you can make your own pie, even though it's like, how many places now have the idea of build your own pizza, even though it's only from the topping that's available there. I don't think maybe put cucumbers on a pie like Kramer was trying to do in a later episode when him and Poppy went into business together. But apparently Joel was interested in the idea also. So from that, I guess Joel was interested in Kramer's business idea. But then, of course, Joel walks in and goes, "I thought you had two of your nephew." And Jerry goes, "Oh, we ended early." And he's like, "Oh, is this your nephew?" referring to Elaine. And he goes, "Oh no, it's Elaine." And he's like, and at first, the first person asking, "Oh, I thought you two broke up. We're just friends." And Joel then thanks Jerry for giving him tickets, but he says he wants to take him to the following game, Tuesday night. And then they go, "Oh, Tuesday, I can't go to Tuesday." Elaine says they have choir practice. And then next thing I think was the following Thursday. And then Elaine's like, "No, I don't think." And then they come to Tuesday, they have to go to the hospital to see if they qualify as organ donors. And then Joel pulls out the list and basically starts running down, and they're sitting there thinking, okay, we'll just come for next week or whatnot. That's how the show went off the air. There was a deleted scene, though, an alternate ending, where Joel borrowed some tape from Jerry, and Joel actually was asking Jerry if he can ask out Elaine. And like, no, that's ridiculous. They got into a fight, and then basically Jerry said, "You know what, Joel, that's it. I don't want to see you again." This time, though, Joel took it like a man. Was like, okay, goes to walk away. He walks out, and Jerry's like, "Yes, I got rid of him." But then he peeks back in and goes, "Oh, by the way, I will be bringing this tape back to you." It's like, he'll be back. Dang it! Like, it started the whole, well, it wasn't mentioned here, but George said it a few times, but it kind of started the whole philosophy of every time I think I'm out, they pull me back in. Basically, if that's what you want to say it is. Um, yeah, like again, Jerry just couldn't catch a break. It felt like he wasn't going to get rid of him. A couple other facts about this episode. Like I said, this was the second episode produced, but it was the fourth episode that aired. It is also, besides the 100th episode with like the highlight 100, I think it's called. It's also one of the only episode that not had the word "the" in the episode title. And eventually, everything became very simple for a title, like the stakeout, the Chinese restaurant, the race, the heart attack. It was just easily standard to what that episode was. And the other reason why too was Jerry Seinfeld said that he wanted the producers to focus more on the actual episode and not come up with creative episode titles. Which I also think it was a show that was called A Show About Nothing, about just them talking about random stuff as random nonsense, but it still was funny. It fit right in pretty good. But yeah, I'd say not a bad episode. Again, all episodes I think are pretty good. There's some like when we get to the stock tip, that's like the last episode from the 5th episode of season 5. That one's just a whatever episode to me, basically. But none of them I think are bad. But yeah, pretty good episode. Again, we went from an episode from the opening one where Jerry's thinking like, what does this mean? What does this mean with him and the girl from New York, or I'm sorry, Michigan. Now to an episode where Jerry's trying to get rid of a friend that he just can't stand. So, interesting story. Also, one more thing I mentioned also, apparently one of the writers said that this is still in the early stages where, Larry David wasn't liking the fact that, even though he was writing the story, a director was basically still trying to change things up. So, I guess he had one of the writers have a tape recorder at the table read just to record whenever the laughs happened to prove these people, hey, look, we can get laughs here, basically. But yeah, just a couple of fun facts, and yep, that's my review of The Male Unbonding. In my second Seinfeld review. Stay tuned for the next review, which is going to be episode 3, The Stakeout. That's a pretty good one. I will look forward to talking about that one definitely next. So, till then, guys, be sure always to continue watching these Seinfeld reviews. Check out my other content on my channel. Be sure always to slap a like on the video, subscribe more content on my channel, follow me on Twitter at DemandAirBoy93. Till then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll see you guys in the next Seinfeld review again, episode 3 of season 1, The Stakeout. Till then, guys, peace out, everybody. No